critical juncture in international relations at this key moment for the NATO alliance, for the British-American alliance, and so much else besides. The state of Idaho, the gem state as known, has produced three chairmen of Senate Foreign Relations Committee: William E. Bower, of course, who was a key figure in opposition to the Woodrow Wilson's League of Nations; Frank Church, chairman in the late 70s, famous perhaps for his inquiries into the CIA, and much else besides. And now, of course, Senator Risch. The gem state has had as it's known, has had a great interest in foreign policy, great longevity of perspective, and Senator Risch stands squarely within that tradition as newly minted chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee in light of the Republican success last November, having previously served as ranking minority member there. So he's very kindly agreed to address us today, and he will then, we'll have an in-conversation with him and then open the floor to questions. No question too outrageous as per the usual House rule. You just first of all have to state your name and organization as a key tool of accountability. So, Senator, looking forward to hearing what you say. Thank you for coming. Thank you for dropping off in London after the Munich Security Conference, and we look forward to hearing what you've got to say. Thank you. Thank you.
I only want to correct one thing in that introduction. That is, I'm not newly, I guess I am newly minted, but I'm a lot like our current president. I'd previously served as chairman of the committee before we lost the majority, and now I'm glad to be back again. So we hope, much like our president, that we'll have a even better second run at it than we did the first time. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to visit with you on the important issues of today. My wife Vicki and I have just come from the Munich Security Conference, along with my small but merry band of warriors who've traveled with me, where we've met with leaders from across Europe. I had over 25 meetings, and I was reminded of just how close America and our European allies are. We're cousins, after all. We share many of the same customs, values, culture, and heritage. We've experienced wars and reconciliations and economic crises followed by prosperity. We share the same goals for the future and a desire for our nations to prosper. And most importantly, we all want our children and grandchildren to grow up in a world that is safe and free. But we all know there are those who do not share these values. Just spin the globe and point. It's hard to find a corner of the world where freedom and security aren't threatened. China is not satisfied with the current balance of power in Asia, or for that matter, in the world. Beijing uses its massive economic resources and rapidly modernizing military to challenge the West. Like China, Russia is a deeply dissatisfied power, but it lacks the capability to challenge the world order by itself. With little help from China, Russia has adopted a more aggressive foreign policy demonstrated by Putin's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. What's more, North Korea, Iran, and even Pakistan present increasingly grave threats to global security. The West faces significant economic and military challenges. I heard real concern about this reality from world leaders in Munich, and I appreciated those conversations. But I fear that without real policy changes to counter the authoritarian axis that seeks to undermine American and European security, we will lose our military edge, our economic might, and our way of life. In America, a generational shift is occurring in our politics. The American people are tired of waiting for substantive change in governance, and the idea of breaking the U.S. bureaucracy is welcomed by most Americans. U.S. foreign policy will reflect this new era, and U.S. interests will come first for the Trump administration. No surprise, since every country wants to pursue its own interests first. When President Trump says America first, he means America first, just as every other country leader says their country first. It's normal It makes sense. Of course, America first, or first for any country, does not mean it is adverse to its allies' interests. No doubt, the allies' interests can be congruent, and that's the way it should be. The days of endless debate are over. This is where the rubber meets the road. America needs our allies to take action and pull their weight militarily and economically. There's been a lot of discussion, as you know, and I've seen it publicized. The media loves to publicize it. Take the war in Ukraine, for instance. Over the last decade, and especially the last 3 years, Putin's aggression has created the largest security crisis Europe has seen in over 70 years. Yet, many European allies have not really changed their policies to reflect this. They need to be changed, and reflection isn't necessary. It's really obvious. Nations have increased their defense spending above the 2% threshold. Some of them have. But this was a Bush-era spending target. That didn't take into account the Russian invasions of 2014 and 2022. Putin's aggression requires a much higher level of defense spending. I know it's going to be difficult. It feels like only a couple of NATO allies really understand this, but more are coming along. I read with interest the British Prime Minister's editorial this morning, and it was congruent with these thoughts. This mismatch in defense spending has produced smaller, less capable militaries across NATO and less firepower to counter aggression wherever it may arise. Few European armies have the capabilities to conduct high-intensity military operations independent from the United States. Among U.S. allies, only the UK and France can project any kind of meaningful combat power abroad. The U.S. has started, but only started, to rebuild its defense industrial base. And no U.S. ally has an industrial base capable of the type of rapid buildup of military power like what we see China undertaking today. The days in which the West can outproduce its enemies, as we did during World War II, all of us, those days are gone. Of course, the alliance between the United States and the United Kingdom is unbreakably strong and remains special. And I recognize that the UK takes on enormous political and military risk on behalf of our collective interests. But friends need to be candid with one another. Like many of America's allies, the British military is too small. The British defense industrial base is in disrepair and its defense spending is too low. Now, I accept the criticism that the U.S. has only begun to undertake these issues seriously. This is one of the greatest policy critiques I had toward the Biden administration, the last administration. But fortunately, President Trump understands the need for strong national defense, and I'll continue to push for greater defense spending and rebuilding the U.S. defense industrial base. The recent bill passed out of the Senate Budget Committee seeks to increase U.S. defense spending, and I'll be voting for it in the coming weeks. The U.S. and its allies must work together with real urgency to revitalize our industrial bases. This means increased long-term spending, contracting reform, and better technology sharing, especially better technology sharing, as well as co-development and co-production of military equipment. NATO needs all of its members to increase defense spending significantly, not only to deter Russia, but to defend against our greatest long-term threat, and we all know what that is, and that's China. China's military is rapidly growing and wreaking havoc in the Indo-Pacific. We have a responsibility to push back on this rising military aggression, and one of the most effective ways to do this is through strategic basing in the region. I'd be remiss if I didn't remind everyone that Diego Garcia serves as an extremely valuable platform for the U.S. to collect intelligence and conduct military operations in the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. Our strategic bombers operate from Diego Garcia, and our nuclear-powered submarines conduct port of calls there. Simply put, Diego Garcia plays an indispensable role in helping all of us deter Chinese aggression. I'm concerned that the decision to hand over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius creates unneeded risk to our military position in the Indian Ocean, and will allow Chinese to gain greater insight into our activities at Diego Garcia. We understand that the government has put measures in place to limit the Chinese Navy's ability to encroach upon Diego Garcia, but it isn't just about the Chinese Navy. We are equally worried about collection activities conducted by China's commercial, so-called commercial, and oceanographic spy vessels. Ceding ground to China is dangerous surrender, and the U.S. and the U.K. need to work together to push back on this. While this is ultimately a British decision, retaining sovereign control over Diego Garcia is imperative for our collective security. China is not only a military risk, but an economic threat as well. In 2024, China's GDP reached approximately $18 trillion, maintaining its position as the world's second largest economy. With shady tactics, China has made significant strides in manufacturing, electric vehicles, and artificial intelligence aimed at reducing its dependence on American and European tech and bolstering its own industries. Just like when it comes to safeguarding global security, America can't counter the economic threat from China on our own. We need our European friends to come alongside us, embrace pro-growth policies to reinvigorate their economies and improve their prosperity. The EU has first-class educational institutions and a highly educated workforce. Europe has incredibly successful businesses, both large and small. But on an overly tight regulatory environment and culture is strangling Europe's ability to compete and to win globally. No country can regulate itself to prosperity. Reasonable laws can encourage a fair marketplace and protect consumers. Entrepreneurs need to be free to innovate and to bolster the European economy. The tech sector highlights this. Of the top 20 tech companies in the world, 14 are in the US, 4 are in Asia, and only 2 are in Europe. Europe is losing its economic edge, but the United States needs Europe to be successful. Economic growth is the only way to sustain much needed defense spending and create an economic and counterweight to China. There's no doubt that we face many challenges in the years ahead. But just as we have in the past, America, the United Kingdom, and other European allies can and must band together to take on authoritarian enemies and secure a future rooted in freedom. While China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran look to undermine our values and wield their power against us, they cannot match the resilience of free nations. By investing in our collective defense and creating a culture where economies can thrive, we will meet the moment with the strength it demands. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me here today.
Thank you, Senator. Much to cogitate upon there. Can I just ask a little more detail about your expectations of us, because there's a broad view that we've been spending too little in the UK amongst many because of our performances better than many other countries, but that we've been spending too little under successive governments in the UK, including this one. Give a little sense, if we don't step up to the plate, however you define that, what the impact would be for US-UK relations.
Well, first of all, UK-US relations are not good, they're great. Do we have spats? Do we have differences? Yeah, of course we do. But this is a long relationship that we have, and it's strong. We're going to disagree on some things, and like marriages or anything else, you have to get past that and move on and carry on. It isn't just me or the United States that's saying that there's too little being spent. I hear it here. I read it this morning from the Prime Minister on the front page of the paper in his editorial. So it's not just us. Look, we're in this together. And like I said, our criticism, and I know Great Britain is free to criticize us too, and you have to be not too thin-skinned about these things and take it in the manner in which it was intended. And the manner in which it was intended was to make us, both of us, stronger, because this challenge we have, look, we're going to get through the Ukraine war. That's going to end not too long, I hope. But the next century, we're looking at China. Vicki and I had the opportunity to travel in China in 1983. And I came away from that and I thought to myself, we're never going to have to worry about this country. I mean, they had nothing in that country. It was a third world country, as much third world as I'd seen anywhere. And now, if you look at the strides they've made in the last few generations, you got to hand it to them. I mean, they have moved monumentally, and they did it the old-fashioned way. They stole every good idea we have, with the exception of our democracy and our freedoms and the things that we all cherish. But they have. It is probably one of the least kept secrets in the world how they loathe international norms and won't comply with them. We have a company in my state called Micron Technology, and they were badly abused by the Chinese and continue to be to this day. This is a peer competitor, and we need to take them seriously, and we all need to band together. Look, I view what's happening in the world today as we are quickly becoming very, very bipolar. On the one hand, you have us, the democracies, or the near democracies, those that have capitalist, free market systems that are entrepreneurial, that respect human rights, and mostly believe that the government and the state exists for the individual. On the other side, you got what I call the no-goodniks. You got Iran, you got North Korea, you have Russia, you have China, who are just the opposite of that. They're authoritarian governments, and they view themselves as having a government that respects the state more than it does the individual. And just like Putin's willing to run 700,000 of his young men through the meat grinder because it's in the best interest of the state. They're authoritarian, they're socialist, they're communist, and we have these two polarities. We are really, really going to need to band together to push back against the other side of the spectrum. But at the same time, we also need to figure out a way how we can all exist on the same planet without killing each other, because we're not going to change. They're not going to change. So how do we exist under those circumstances? And we can do this together. There's no more better ally than Great Britain and Europe for us to partner with as we do this pushback.
When you look at it, what would be the impact of the perception, China's perception of the US and the collective deterrent capacities of Western democracies, of a perception of a pro-Russian or Russia-friendly outcome in Ukraine now? What's the domino, to use a term of art, effect of that?
Well, I think that first of all, we've got to all see that there isn't a Ukraine an end to this that shows Russia as a winner. Look, Russia's already lost this war. Ukraine hasn't won it, but Russia's lost it. You look what they said that their objectives were at the beginning. They were going to march on Kyiv and in a few days take it over and then occupy the country. Russia will never occupy Ukraine. I deal with the Ukrainians every day. They'll fight them with broomsticks if they have to avoid an occupation. Certainly the outcome would that's almost a rhetorical question, is what Russia or what China would think, and that is they would think that we the West are a declining power. We are not a declining power. Our innovation, our freedoms will prevail, and China needs to recognize this. I really think that as President Trump moves forward on the diplomacy that is going to take place to end this war, that he's going to get it at a place where, when it comes out, obviously there's going to be no happy people. There'll be people who say, yes, we got this, we got that. Each will claim victory on some things. But we're going to have to accept that there's going to be things that we don't like come out of that either. And by the way, I know this dust-up that's happened over the last this weekend over the table. Who's going to be at the table? There is not going to be any table here. This is going to be a shuttle diplomacy, and everybody's going to have a hand in this. Everybody's going to have a say in this, and this doesn't end obviously unless the Ukrainians sign off, because all they got to do is keep fighting. So we all need to pray and get behind the president as he does this, and behind all of our allies as they contribute to this. And I've discussed this with a lot of the European allies. The president wants input. He will get input. But at the end of the day, it's going to be Ukraine that makes the call on this, and that's how we'll get to the end of it.
And just in terms of the scale and order of priorities of threats, Vice President Vance, in his speech at Munich Security Conference, made it clear that mass immigration in the United States, Europe, and the effects thereof, culturally, politically, security-wise, indeed, are very high up his scale of priorities. I'd like you to sort of grade that in terms of your view of the multiplicity of challenges in a complex world.
Well, there are a multiplicity of challenges. There's no question about it. And one of those challenges is immigration. I don't think there's any question about that. Look, the presidency of the United States just turned over because of the issue of immigration. We did not control, for the last 4 years, have not controlled the southern border till about 3 weeks ago, and the American people were really fed up with it. I mean, they were angry about it, and we had lots and lots of people come in. They're trying to reverse that now and take some out. But it is, look, we're a country of immigration. We understand immigration. We've always had legitimate immigration through the front door. When they come through the front door, you can find out who's coming and deal with it. You can also control the numbers. We can easily absorb immigration. Indeed, we need immigration, but not just an unbridled surge through the back door. We saw days where 10,000 people were coming across the border in the United States. In fact, 10,000 was about a regular number coming. We can deal with it, but it's got to be dealt with in an orderly fashion. And I think everyone looks at that as being a culture changer that isn't an absorption, and it is an issue. It's an issue for us. It's an issue for Europe.
And you're a distinguished lawyer before entering politics, and one of the aspects of public policy in this country since the UK election in the 4th of July last year is the perception that some in the current government have take a maximalistic view of the remit of law, and particularly of international law. One of the examples might be the role of the International Criminal Court. The Trump administration has obviously pronounced recently on that. Another example might be the whole question of the export licenses for weapons components for Israel. You've obviously talked already tonight about Chagos extensively. Just be interested in your view, a candid exchange amongst friends about where the differences are there.
Well, as I said at the beginning, we are going to have differences, and I get that. I mean, I've been in politics. Vicki and I have run 36 elections together. This is my 45th year in the Senate, 28 at the state, now 17 at the federal. And look, I understand differences, and a couple of that you pointed out are certainly differences that we have. We disagree, but our cultures are a little different, and we got to learn to live with those. On the situation as far as the cutting off the licenses for export of weapons, I was critical of it at the time. I thought it was wrong. And I've been critical of the ICC, as you know and has probably seen. I have real difficulty with an organization like the ICC claiming to have the high ground and dispensing justice, when in fact they got one foot on each side of the fence. I mean, any organization that would indict Hamas on the same day, indict the Israeli leader who is simply defending his country. This is an organization that doesn't understand justice, and I am not willing to cede U.S. sovereignty to a group like that. It's obviously political. It was done on the same day, obviously, to send a political message to each side, and I don't like it. And I've said so publicly. I have the same problem with the United Nations today. I mean, they're trying to have one foot on each side of the fence, and the Secretary General used to come in and see me at least quarterly. I haven't seen him in a while, have we, Chris? Every time he comes in, I say, "Okay, what have you done?" And he says, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, you're the United Nations. What have you done?" And he starts talking about the food that they do, and I said, "No. Your foundation is that all the countries will come together, sign an agreement, will not invade each other, will not start wars willy-nilly. You got one going on. What have you done to stop it?" And then he talks for a bit, but the fact of the matter is, it hasn't done anything to stop it. And furthermore, I tell him, you can't even pass a resolution condemning it. Why? We're sending billions of dollars to the United Nations, and what are we getting out of it? And what we get out of it is the United Nations trying to keep the autocrats and democracies happy. It doesn't work, you know. You've got to be able to distinguish right from wrong. I get really upset about that, as you can tell.
And just a final thing before turning over to the audience, because I think there's obviously been much tension here as throughout the world on the President's view on Gaza. Obviously, you'll be an important player on the legislative side on that, on his plan for the future of
well,
Gaza.
yeah, I'll say this. The President has the habit of thinking and speaking outside the box, and that was certainly what he did and laid on the table an idea. And interestingly enough, I met with King Abdullah of Jordan last week, and they and the Egyptians, who were the two other countries that the president spoke of, have said, "Look, give us 2 or 3 weeks, and we're going to come up with our own plan." We're anxious to hear that plan, and anything we can do to move that along, we'd be very grateful for. But look, I can tell you this about the war in Gaza. The President of the United States is becoming very, very impatient with this, and us, you, our other allies, in the late 1930s made a decision that the Nazis could not exist as a military power, as a political power, as a cultural power, or anything else because of the evilness with which that they had. We set out to kill them all. And we joined together and we did that. And the ones we didn't catch on the battlefield, we got a hold of later and did the same thing to them after a trial. Israel's facing the exact same thing with Hamas. We all saw them when they had a ceasefire. What happened? The Hamas fighters come out with their signals and saying, "And we're going to do it again." Look, these guys cannot exist. They cannot exist with Israel. So I don't know what kind of peace plan they're going to put together that they come up with. But there's no scenario in which Hamas can participate in the governance of the Palestinian people. If they do, we're going to start this all over again.
Thank you. I know there'll be many questions, many takers. Just trying to see through the light here. Who wants to ask a question? Gentleman there towards the front. Yes. Name and organisation, please.
Thank you. Sanford Henry.
Organisation, please.
Global Resources. I'm curious about what the view is of Ireland in terms of the policy of the Good Friday Agreement and what the stance will be in terms of the new administration.
Yeah. I'm going to pass on that one, and I'll tell you why. I've done this a long time, and I recognize parochial issues when they're parochial issues. And you guys are going to have to work through this, and we were involved previously to the little extent that we were. But I'm going to pass on that one if it's okay. I'm anxious to see how you work through this. I get it.
Gentleman there towards the front, second row again, other side of things. Name and organisation, please.
Simon Brocklebank, Fowler, Horizon 6, a defence intelligence consulting firm. I was very interested in your comments on the horrific crimes committed by Gaza. or by Hamas. Would you accept that crimes have been committed in Ukraine, which in some areas are of equivalent horror, mass shootings of civilians, pits that haven't been seen since the Nazi atrocities to which you also referred? How would you see the United States would play a role in bringing some of the individuals to account? And how far do you feel President Putin should be held accountable in that scenario?
Yeah, I first of all, I've been to Bucha, and I've seen what they've done, and I've seen the video, and it's horrific. There's absolutely no question that there's just atrocious war crimes that have been committed. Now, how that shakes out as they put this thing together, I can't answer that at this point. Obviously, the easy answer to that question is we should bring everybody before the bar of justice and have them answer. But I can't answer how it will shake out at the end. I can tell you this: I know that the Israelis, as you know, have a long, long memory, and they have a long, long list of people who've done these things, and the Ukrainians are much the same way. So you're going to see. It'll be interesting to see how this shakes out. I don't have a magic solution for you now, but the simple answer to your question is yes, they need to be held accountable.
Others? Who else do I see? Lady there in the second row, please. Name and organisation. Thank you.
Good evening, Caroline Flynn McLeod, Torrington Management. Senator, you referred to this weekend's little dust-up. I wonder, can you give a view as how you think Russia will view that vis-a-vis Europe and the United States, and whether he will see the Western alliance, NATO, as weakened, or whether he will view it as giving us sort of strength, greater strength and resolve, and how you would characterize the Chinese view of our little dust-up this weekend.
Two different questions, because you're dealing with two very, very different entities. I expect it probably doesn't sit on the Chinese that much. I don't think they're not as engaged right on this continent like Russia is. As far as Russia's concerned, they probably got a little bit of chuckle out of it, as anybody does when they see friends having a spat. I can't imagine that it makes. I can't imagine when they do their strategic planning that they're going to say, "Oh, the U.S. and Russia, the U.S. and European allies are at odds." That didn't happen this weekend, and if they think that happened, they're even dumber than I think they are.
Others, please. Do I see? I see quite a lot of questions. Yes, the gentleman 3 rows from the front. Yeah, thank you. Name and organisation, please.
Hi, Jake Canton-Perry, Atticus Partners. Good evening, Senator. In your opening remarks, you talked about how important growth was in Europe and how increased defence spending can come from that. Do you believe Trump's tariffs or incoming tariffs could have a detrimental effect towards that?
I would say this on the tariffs question. This is a fluid situation. It's not fully decided yet. I'm friends with the Canadian foreign minister, and she called me immediately when they started talking about the 25% on tariff on Mexico and Canada. Well, those lasted 48 hours or a little less than that. I told her, stay calm, we'll get through this. And look, we've done this before with tariffs. Tariffs should be there's a place for tariffs, but a place for tariffs certainly isn't just to aggravate allies. It's something that'll be negotiated. The Trump team did a pretty decent job of negotiating that during their first term. They're complicated, they always are. Without giving examples, I think everybody knows that there are exceptions and other things that come into play there. So I'm not particularly worried about that. Those tariffs were not put in place to in any way try to ratchet back the growth of the United States or the growth of our allies. So we'll move forward, and I think we'll get through that.
I see several other hands are up. Yes, gentlemen, one row back, further back. Yep. Name an organisation, please.
Hi, I'm Nicky, News Agency TASS, London Bureau correspondent. Senator, do you think that new security architecture must be built now in Europe following war in Ukraine, for the previous security architecture failed to prevent war in the region? So my question, what could this new system look like, and shall European countries and Western countries in general bear in mind Russian interest to achieve long and stable peace for decades to come?
Well, first of all, I don't think we need a new structure. There were people sat around after World War II and gave us a structure that created the most successful defense organization in the history of the world. And I think what we need to do is say a little prayer and thank them for what they did. That, as you say, it didn't deter this, but you recall that that agreement has held for all the people who have joined. And indeed, it has underscored how good that architecture is, because we had two people jump up and want to join it that have been following the neutrality ground for some time. They recognize how good this structure is. I had been pressing both the Finns and the Swedes to join for some time, which they said, no, you know, our polling says neutrality, and 70% or more of our people think we ought to remain neutral. Vicky and I had the occasion to have dinner with an important Finnish official about 3 weeks before the invasion, and I again extended the invitation, and he was very defensive and said, no, you know, they wanted to stay neutral. And so about a week after the invasion, fast forward, I saw him at a reception and came across the room and he says, hey, how's that neutrality thing working out for you guys? And he says, we're in. And so I picked up that baton and carried it to where we, notwithstanding our friends in Hungary and Turkey, we got through that and got them in. That architecture that those guys built is stronger today than it has ever been. And even Putin, even with the stupid mistakes that he has made, I believe he is not stupid enough to set a foot on Article 5 ground. Because if he does, we have sent the message as loudly and clearly as it can be sent that Article 5 means what it says, not 1 square inch. Whether it's on the eastern border of the Baltics, or whether it's in London, or whether it's in Los Angeles, not 1 square inch. No military organization in the history of the world could ever say that and have people believe it. They believe it and should believe it.
I see there are quite a lot of other. I'm so blinded by the light here. At least it ensures my impartiality, and I can't engage in favoritism towards friends and family. Gentleman there, I think, on far left as I look at it. Name an organisation, please.
Jonathan Hall. I'm the independent reviewer of state threat legislation. I guess if I was Russia, I'd want to send a message to the voters of the UK and Europe and say, don't put up spending, don't fight for your country. They're all a bad lot. Your politicians, your country's broken. So I'd like to get your reflections, if I may, on the sort of information warfare, information strategic messaging, because it's a bit of a problem on social media. But I've just come back from DC last week, and the message I was getting from officials was First Amendment, First Amendment, First Amendment. We can't tackle disinformation, even though I suppose it's possible it could have quite a significant effect. And just grateful for your reflections on that.
You know, that's a really good question. The First Amendment is pretty dear to us. We had this little issue with Great Britain some years back, and we wrote a Bill of Rights, and the very first thing they said was, you can speak your mind. And so it is very difficult to argue that people can't speak their mind. So, look, this is going to be around for as long as we have the communications we have today, and our communications are going to do nothing but get better as we go over time. What you have to do is when somebody says something that's false, you need to stand up and push back on it. I don't think that that by restricting free speech that it's going to be helpful. And you know, they've said over and over again, the best anecdote for a lie is the truth, and that's what we need to put out there. There just really isn't a way around that. I mean, if they say, well, we're gonna review this and only put out the truth, okay, but I want to be the reviewer, okay, and so it just doesn't work to have somebody go in and try to cut that under. We're going to win that battle. You know, are there losses along the way? Sure, there's losses along the way, but let's not lose our First Amendment rights. Let's not lose or in any way impede our freedom to talk about what's on our mind. We deal with people that are wrong all the time, but you've got to push back and state the truth.
I just see one person online, Baroness Rawlings, House of Lords. Can you hear me, Baroness Rawlings? Can you hear me? Third chance.
Can you hear me?
We hear you loud and clear. Your question, please.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much indeed. I think the Senator gave a very important brief speech and gives us a very positive approach, which gives one confidence. I want to ask about defence, how he feels about the sea coastal areas around America and the Arctic and the sabotage of sea cables. And I applaud his stance on Diego Garcia.
The question was about the sabotage and particularly the sea cables.
Correct.
Look, first of all, that's a serious issue. I think we all know that. So far, from what we can tell, we know who did this, but we can't prove it. Now, that's a very difficult position to be in. I'm not tolerant to that at all. And you know, people say, well, the sea cable was an accident. Look, that's baloney. We haven't had accidents like that in a long time, and all of a sudden we got a whole bunch of them, and they're all aimed at the same victims. So I don't buy that at all. At some point in time, when we do get evidence, and if they continue down this path, they're going to make a mistake. And there is going to be evidence, and then something very serious is going to have to be done about it. So I think we need to send the message loud and clear that they're really pushing the envelope too far. They're going to get caught, and they're going to pay the price.
I see a lot of questions. Gentleman towards the back on the far side of the room, by the pillar there, if I'm correct.
Thank you.
Name and organisation, please.
My name's Shervin Sharastani. I'm from Iran International. Senator, thank you for your speech. I just want to ask you, what is your personal view about Israeli threats against Iran's nuclear centers, specifically targeting them with or without American help? And how does Iran fall into this triumvirate of, you know, aggrieved nations against the West, and how you see that? Thank you.
I didn't catch the part about when you said with American help or something like that. Could you?
With or without?
With or without.
Israeli striking with or without United States assistance.
Look, let's start with this. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, period. I mean, that's what we, as a free people, as democracies, as people who want to protect ourselves, protect the world from World War III, Iran has not proven itself to be a responsible person or a responsible entity to deal with nuclear weapons. Having said that, look, I know Mr. Netanyahu pretty well. I've sat across the table from him for a long time. He says, and he says it very clearly and very specifically, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon because we will stop it. And you know what? I believe him. And you know what else? I think Iran believes him. A nuclear weapon is not that hard to make. If they wanted a nuclear weapon, they'd have had a nuclear weapon by now. And they would be making a very, very bad mistake if they proceeded to develop a nuclear weapon. So it isn't something I lay awake at night worrying about any more than I lay awake at night worrying when Lavrov comes out and says, oh, if you do that, we're going to have to break out the nuclear weapons. Get real. That's delusional, for crying out loud. There's things you can believe and things you don't believe. Doesn't mean you shouldn't get ready for it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't protect yourself. You should. But there's stuff that is said that I just don't believe it. And I think Iran is not going to move to a nuclear weapon. If they do, they've got a problem. They got a really, really serious problem.
See quite a lot of other. There's in the middle there on the right side. As I look at it, there's a hand I can see. Name and organisation, please.
Hello, Daisy Peck from Boeing. Senator, I really welcome your comments that the growth of the UK's defence industrial base is a shared endeavour with the US. Because I think one of the best tools we've got here to supercharge our industrial base is actually to work with the US defence primes. However, we're also seeing a trend, both in the US, in the UK, and in Europe, to onshore more defence production. Now, I'm interested in how the economic priorities to onshore more for jobs comes up against that security imperative to collaborate, and how that will work through. Thank you.
By onshoring them, do you mean a nationalistic approach for your own job growth as opposed to other people's? Look, I really think that there's enough of this to go around for everybody, first of all. Secondly, each of us have specialties in certain areas and are better at things than others are. The free market is an amazing thing. And if you open up the free market to this, which parties pretty much have, it works well for all of us. And I have not seen that nationalistic selfishness that I've heard people predict before. I haven't seen it. Sure, each country is going to try to create as many jobs as they can in their own country. But nonetheless, I don't think they're going to do something wastefully that they could do more productively in a different country. And look, we hear way too much about our differences between us, the U.S. and either Great Britain or Europe. Our commonality way overshadows our differences, and I'm not concerned about that aspect of how we need to do things. I am concerned about, and I have been a vocal critic, particularly as to the last of the Biden administration, as we've worked together on AUKUS. I've been critical that we haven't been doing the technology sharing that we should be doing. Look, if we can't share the technology with Great Britain or Australia, part of the Five Eyes, who in the world can we share it with? And it's been way too slow, way too cumbersome, and not nearly as effective as it should have been. So I'm going to continue to press back against that, and I think that's good also for opening up the borders.
I think again in the middle there, somebody at the very edge there on that. Yes. Name and organisation, please.
James Mulligan from Morgan, Lewis and Bockius. Senator, thank you for your time today, and I really appreciate your last answer. In your view, what are the prospects of a UK-US free trade agreement during this administration?
I can't answer that. I've been a proponent a long time for free trade, or fairly close to free trade. The reason I say fairly close to free trade, you will understand my reservation in that Vicky and I are ranchers, and we've been trying to put beef over here for a long, long time. So, you don't want to go overboard on these things. Look, a free trade, or as close as you can get it, should be the goal anytime you're talking with allies, plain and simple. And President Trump has always had in mind the idea that he wants to see a level playing field. And even though we're the 800-pound gorilla, he still wants to see a level playing field. And it is difficult sometimes. But that's a good thought.
I see plenty of questions. Yes, there's another hand. I can see sort of tall, long hands. That's all I can see.
Keval Nathwani from In-House Communications. Senator, the vast majority of your comments at the beginning focused around China, and I wanted to ask if you see China as a greater threat to global security than Russia, because I suspect that certainly the British government doesn't share that view, given that the Foreign Secretary was in China last week and the Chancellor about a month ago, and if you do, whether President Trump shares that view.
Look, I'm going to agree with you up to the point where you said you're not sure that the British government agrees with me on that. Look, China is the threat. It is the threat of the century. And I haven't met anybody in the British government that would say, oh, no, you're wrong on that. Russia's the one. I would disagree with anybody that said that. They are two very different entities. You can't think about them the same. When you think about Russia, what do they want? They want chaos. I mean, they never miss a chance to cause chaos wherever they set their foot. When you're dealing with the Chinese, first thing you got to do is hang on to your wallet. That's the first thing you need to do. If you do that, you're going to come away from it not too badly. But they are a threat. They are the threat. They're the what I think the most significant threat as we go. Look, we're a quarter way through this century already. Where'd the time go? But as we go through this century, they are going to continue to be the threat. I believe it. I think the British government believes that. Like I say, I would disagree with your premise that they don't understand it. The fact that the Prime Minister went and talked to Xi, that doesn't tell me anything other than he wanted to make sure that he would have decent communications so we don't have a mistake. Whatever we do, we don't want a mistake. And the only way you avoid from making a mistake is if you talk to each other. No matter how bad you hate each other, you got to talk to each other.
I see there's some more questions, just a few more. Maybe we'll take the last ones as a pair of questions. Do I see, or was I imagining things? Imagining, was there anyone else? So I have...
this means we answered every question.
Not
right?
quite.
I mean,
not
this
quite.
is wonderful.
One last curveball.
Oh, all right.
One last curveball from who's WhatsApped me from the defence and political correspondent of the Times, George Grills. He says, to the best of the Senator's knowledge, is the Trump administration now examining the Chagos deal? Does he, the Senator, believe the President shares his concerns?
And I didn't understand the question. On what issue again?
Chagos Islands. Diego Garcia, sorry.
You know, I can't speak for the administration on that. I spoke from what I believe, and I haven't talked with. I talked with President Trump a lot. I talked to Marco Rubio a whole lot more. I think that I'd be surprised if their position was different than mine. It may not have the same energy. It may not have the same intensity. I'd be surprised if the position was different than mine. But they're only 3 weeks on the ground. We need to give them a little more time to answer those kind of questions.
Well, we wish we had more time for you, Senator. But
thank you.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.